touch the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fade are never enough. Then you came along and put me back together, and every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing is better than you. Yeah. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Lord, there's nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing is better than you.
There are some stories that end with a quaint little phrase, and they lived happily ever after. But this is not one of those stories. This is the grim tale of Ananias and Sapphira. The early church had begun to flourish, and all the believers were getting along quite splendidly. They shared everything they had with one another, claiming nothing as their own. There were no needy people among them. Those who owned fields or houses sold them and brought the proceeds to the apostles as a gift. Joseph was one such man who sold a field he owned and brought the money to the apostles as an offering. And oh, what a wonderful blessing it was to everyone. All the believers were encouraged and celebrated Joseph's selfless act. Well, not everyone. A couple named Ananias and Sapphira, who were counted among the believers, saw the way Joseph was admired and grew very jealous. "He thinks he's better than us," they grumbled to each other. "We deserve that kind of attention." They dwelt on it day and night. Finally, one night, they devised a plan to sell a piece of land, secretly keeping part of the money for themselves and giving the rest to the apostles. They would not necessarily say they were giving all of the money they received from the sale. They would just let everyone assume it, and presto, they would instantly be famous as self-sacrificing believers who surrendered everything to Jesus. So, with his wife's consent, Ananias sold the land, secretly kept part of the money, and brought the remainder to the apostles. But Peter saw right through Ananias, saying, "Ananias, why have you let evil fill your heart? You lied to the Holy Spirit, and you kept some of the money for yourself. How could you do a thing like this? You weren't lying to us, but to God." As soon as Ananias heard these words, he fell to the floor dead. Everyone who heard the news was filled with fear. Then some young men got up, wrapped him in a sheet, and took him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, Sapphira came in, not knowing what had happened. Everyone nervously watched as Peter asked her, "Was this the price you and your husband received for your land?" The room fell silent. "Yes," she replied, "that was the price." Peter responded, "How could the two of you even think of conspiring to test God like this? The young men who buried your husband are just outside the door, and they will carry you out too." No sooner were the words out of his mouth than she also fell down dead. When the young men returned, they found her body. They carried her out and buried her beside her husband. By this time, the whole church, and in fact, everyone who heard of these things, had a newfound respect for God. So, unfortunately, there's no happy ending in this tale, but there is a warning here to take God very seriously. Dare I say, deadly serious.
Well, we're going to take up the offering now. Wouldn't this be a really good time? Ananias and Sapphira, that's in the Bible, that's in the New Testament. That's not one of the weirder ones from the Old Testament, that's in your Bible. Online giving is a great way... No, I'm only joking. It's a dark story about duplicity. And if anybody needs some help working through that story, see someone else. No, you can talk to me. So today we're going to talk about that, not about that. We're going to talk about our yes being yes and our no being no. And about an issue that we all have in not entering into the game of spin, of lying. And so this is going to be a bit uncomfortable for a little bit because this is an issue that Jesus gets to as part of the "you have heard it said, but I say unto you." And so let me start with this question as a kind of way in. When do you think, if you had to guess, and some of you will know, when do you think children are first able to lie? Now, when do you think? No, just have a, what do you think? At conception, did somebody say? No? Okay. Well, we often say when they can speak. But I read an interesting study that was done at the University of the Sacred Heart in Tokyo, Japan, a number of years ago. And they discovered that babies who were born, they couldn't even talk, yet learned to cry. They learned to cry when they were not distressed. We all think babies cry when they need something, need to be changed or fed or given a new car or whatever it is that they want to cry about. But they got this study together and said that babies, even before they can say words, learn how to deceive their parents to come to them when they are not in distress. Think that's true? Okay, right. They last about the first 35, 40 years, and then we learn. They'll get their parents to give them attention they want, and on it goes. But when kids learn to use words, they are capable of lying, and they're actually pretty bad at lying when they first start to lie. And we sometimes laugh at their lies and go, "Oh, well, we know they're lying," One of the big lies my children told me was when their youngest sibling, Riley, was born, and she was about 6 months old. By the way, she's 18 in 2 weeks' time. Can you believe that? When she was about 6 months old, I left her to play with her other siblings who were only little kids then. They were 4 and 3 and whatever other, I forget. I should really learn their names sometime. But I went out to do something, and Riley, as a baby, was in her room and on this little plaything that they do. I went out, and somehow when I came back after several minutes, she was gone. And I heard her sort of, not crying, but making a noise way down a hallway and into a lounge room. And so I went down there, and there was Riley with her siblings. Now, her siblings have been told that they're never to pick Riley up because she's a little baby and they're little kids. And so I went into my interrogation of these 4-year-old and 6-year-old, and I asked them, well, tell me how your baby sister got all the way down from her room, all the way down that hall, around the bend into the family room, or the good room, as we call it. And lies were told to me. I don't know, Dad. Maybe she walked. She can't crawl yet. And this went on, and finally I asked again, how did your baby sister get all the way from her room, all the way down that big hall, into the good room? How did it happen? Then finally one of them cracked. You get one, you get them all, don't you? And he said, we rolled her. Can you imagine? The mental image of my beautiful, now nearly to be 18-year-old daughter rolling, getting rolled like a burrito all the way down and all the way left. Lies. I laugh too. Where do these little people learn how to lie? From bigger people, don't they? In lots of ways. There's a famous study that said about deception that the vast majority of adults lie 2 to 3 times in a 10-minute conversation. So they will embellish something, they will be the hero of a story they are not, they will quote themselves as saying something they didn't, or hearing something they didn't hear. 2 to 3 times in an average 10-minute conversation. They will say things like, I'm fine, nothing's wrong. It's a lie. I was stuck in traffic. My phone died. I had no way to contact you. I'll be right back. I'll see you in church this Sunday. All kinds of lies. Lying is found in every culture of the world, and every person seated here, and every person that'll listen to this or watch it on YouTube later, and every person that won't. We lie about our motives, our intentions, what we really said, what really happened. We lie on our taxes, some of us, our expense accounts, our resumes. We lie to people we love. We lie to people we loathe. We lie to get stuff, to sell stuff, to impress other people. Lying or deception is a big problem. A few years back, they have the word of the year from the Oxford Dictionary. Ironically, they use 2 words to describe the word of the year: post-truth. You've maybe heard that expression, have you? That truth is now relative to one's own experience. Relativism is rampant in our society. It is true for me. If you say 2 and 2 is 4, and my truth is that it is 5, then the truth is that it is 5. We live in a post-truth world. One researcher said the number one finding in surveying people about deception is that they lie about how much they lie. So this is endemic in our lives, and we have to deal with it. Jesus talked about truth-telling in the Sermon on the Mount, and we've already seen over the last couple of weeks, when he talked about stuff, he went back in reference to a something or a command that they had heard. For instance, when we looked at anger, we saw that he referenced, you've heard it said that you shall not murder. He invoked the 6th commandment of the 10 commandments. Same thing with marriage, which we didn't deal with. He said, you shall not commit adultery in the 7th command of those 10 commands. And then today we would expect Jesus would go to number 9 in the 10 commands, which is you shall not bear false witness, but he doesn't. He begins in a different place, and that's where we're going to be today. We're going to be in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 33 to 37, if you're following along. But lying and deception is a very damaging thing to us and to community and to family and to relationships, and so it's something that we need to take seriously. One of the icebreaker games now in most places you go is 2 truths and a lie. And the game is that you have to tell 2 true things about yourself and one that is not true, one that is a lie. And the winner of that particular competition is the one who can convince other people most successfully that they are deceptive. And we've got a whole sort of rogues gallery there of liars and people who have been found in their lies. But before we get too judgmental, there could well be a picture of us up there. So Jesus continues to tell us how to live this kingdom life. He says, again, you have heard it said, again, to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows that you make. And then he does what Jesus does. He says, but I tell you, do not swear at all, and we'll get to that, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the great city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, or you cannot make even one hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes and your no be no, and anything beyond that comes from the evil one. Now, there's a whole lot of stuff in there that is culturally significant to those who heard it, and we'll work through some of that, but not all of it. You might want to take a deep dive into some of that, because it's we could be here forever, when we won't be. But the premise is that you have heard, Jesus said, you've heard that life works like this. But I tell you something that is truer and better, the kingdom of God way. And what inner goodness and righteousness looks like, which we looked at last week, is different to what the world says righteousness and goodness looks like. It's actually different to what the religious elite say that goodness and righteousness is. Little kids sometimes invent things to go along with their statements to support their promise, often to disguise their lie. They will say things like, I promise I'm telling you the truth this time. So what do you immediately think? Well, you haven't been telling me the truth all the other times. McDonald's came out, and I follow McDonald's very closely, this restaurant, and they came out recently, only a few years ago, and said, come now and buy our chicken McNuggets now with real chicken. So what have I been shoveling into my kids for the last little bit, you see? I tell you the truth. I promise I'm telling you the truth this time. And we add variations. Cross my heart, hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. That's right. Every culture has these oaths, these promises, not just back then. An oath seeks to invoke something sacred or higher. In the ancient world, an oath would sound something like, may the gods deal with me severely if I am not telling the truth. Even today, people will say things like, I swear on my mother's grave, or on my children's lives. Or I swear by all that is sacred or holy. I swear on a stack of Bibles. They might as well swear on a stack of pancakes, you see. And this has echoes all the way back to Deuteronomy. Israel was taught to take oaths in the name of Yahweh, in the name of God. Fear the Lord your God and serve him, and only take your oaths in his name. Abraham said to the king of Sodom, with hand raised, I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and on earth. And even to this day, if we go to a courtroom, if we're going as a witness or whatever, we swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. I know you can take an oath or other than that. We will often be asked to put our hand upon a Bible and raise our hand to solemnly swear. Now, in Jesus' day, a good and devout Jew would often refrain from even using the name of God as a refrain or a sign of devotion. They didn't want to misuse the sacred name of God, so they would substitute in and out for the name of God other things. So they would swear by heaven, or swear by Jerusalem, or swear by something other than the name of God. That's what that bit's about. But Jesus goes to the heart of the problem with this oath system. So swearing a truth in this passage is one example in our day of what we might call a spin or a song and a dance. And we're going to see in the second half why truth matters and why telling the truth matters and why it is a good and wonderful habit to develop that your yes be yes and your no be no. And that has huge impact, not only in the way we'll live our lives and do our relationships, but our witness as a Christian community in the places in which we live. Our society this week, our nation, has been dealing with deception, right up to whatever you think about it politically, but deception. And people just shrug their shoulders and go, oh yeah, politicians, they just tell lies. Well, not us, not the people of God. And if you're feeling a bit of guilt or shame about this subject, well, you are in good and bad company. The Bible is full of people who used deception when they went away from the things of God. Adam and Eve and Cain and Abraham and Sarah and Moses and Aaron and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Rachel and David and Solomon and Herod and Ananias and Sapphira. But when we think about these things and when we come back for the sort of second half of this, I want to reintroduce you to probably the most famous lie or piece of deception in the whole of the Bible. And it's not Ananias and Sapphira. It's by a person whom Jesus himself said, on the likes of you, I'm going to build my church. So we've heard it said, oath-taking and swearing by sacred entities or on people's eyes and graves and stuff like that doesn't get to the heart of the problem. That's an exterior thing. And so I want to tell you a bit about this person that Jesus said, I will build my church on the likes of you. And of course, that is Simon Peter, or Peter as we know him. And Peter was a man that learnt the hard way about God's grace at times. He was kind of the spokesperson for the group that he was in, the disciples, but that not only brought him great joy and I suppose comfort at times, but it also brought a great deal of problems into his life. We know that Peter was the first called, or one of the first called to follow Jesus, and probably, really, without dispute, I guess, the most influential, or one of the most influential Christ followers who has ever lived. And you remember the night before Jesus died on the cross, he warned his disciples, including Peter, that they would all engage in disowning him. And he said that all of you here will disown me. And Peter was the one who made this statement. He said, well, even if all fall away on account of you, I, Jesus, I never will. Truly I tell you, not just I tell you, but truly I tell you. Jesus answered, this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And so I want to deal with a well-known story of Peter's deception and his no being yes and his yes being no, and how we can learn about the grace of God even when we do that which is not honouring to him. Here's another question. Do you think Peter was sincere when he made that statement? I think he was. I didn't think he thought, well, you know, I kind of see what's going to happen here, but even if they all run away and scatter, I know what I will do. And it reminds me that we don't really know what we'll do until we're in that situation, do we? We don't know how brave we'll be or how cowardly we'll be. What is in us? I watched a movie last night about those 13 Thai soccer kids, little boys that got rescued from that cave. Remember that a few years ago? And boy, that was a hard watch because it's very claustrophobic, and I won't ruin it for you. You know the end of the story, they all get out. But it took an enormous amount of bravery, and in that movie, one of the guys says, I just don't know if I'm able to do this until I do it. And the group around, we don't know that either. But a few hours later, we know that Jesus is on trial to be crucified, and Peter is not around him, but he's sitting in a courtyard. He's about as close to Jesus as he dares to be. And a servant sees Peter and claims that Peter has been with Jesus. And the scripture says now, Peter was sitting in this courtyard and a servant girl came to him. She said, you were also with Jesus of Galilee. She's not accusing him of anything. But he denied it before them all. He said, I don't know what you're talking about. Now that's an interesting first step in deception, isn't it? I just don't know what you're talking about. This is the excuse of my children when they rolled their sister up a hall. I don't know. What, me? Who? What? What was the information? What was the story? I don't know what you're talking about. In other words, I don't want to even deal with it. Maybe Peter had convinced himself of what was true. Maybe he was delving in a little bit of relativism or post-truth in his own life. This is happening, but if I look the other way, it's not really happening. I do that all the time. Just hope it goes away. I don't know what you're talking about. We get good at that, and we rationalise the deception in that act. So Peter lies. It's not an outright lie. It's certainly not a white lie, whatever on earth that is. It's a lie, but it's deception. And the next part of the story is that then Peter went out from the courtyard into the gateway, where another servant saw him and said to the people there, this guy, or this fellow, was with Jesus of Nazareth. And Peter's response is that he denied it. But this time, not just, I don't know what you're talking about, but this time with an oath, to put a little horsepower behind his denial. I don't know what you're talking about, and now he has physically moved himself from the courtyard away from where he was, maybe physically to get further away from the truth. And often we do that. We can physically remove ourselves. We don't just deny it, but we want to get as far away from that which we don't want to know about to somewhere else. Peter gets physically further away because he knows he's too close and he's likely to have an answer or have to answer a question, and that question might involve the truth. And that's part of lying. It's hiding, it's avoiding, it's running, it's separating. The first thing that Adam and Eve did when they fell to sin in the garden is they hid. They played this ridiculous game of hide and seek with God, who sees everything. Who sees everything. And that's how ridiculous it is when we run and hide and think that we have outrun God, who is like the one poet said, the hound of heaven who will pursue us. But Peter denied it again with an oath. I don't know that man. This time Peter takes an oath. Now we don't know what form the oath took. It could have been by heaven, it could have been by Jerusalem, it might even have been by the very name of Yahweh. It could have been on his parents' life, it could have been any oath he'd like to make up to. But now he is appealing to a higher court than simply his own deception. He's looking to justify his own lie. This time he's saying there is now real chicken in the nuggets, if you like. I don't know the man. And the lie is more direct. This time it's I don't know. Lying tends to work that way. It is easier to go further a second time, isn't it? It's easier to go further than the second time, the third time, and the fifth time, and the 12th time, until you start to believe in this post-truth world that the lie is actually the truth, and the truth is actually the lie. And we spin this web. We spin this web, and we get stuck in the lie. A deceptive soul is always a distant and divided soul. A deceptive soul is always a distant and divided soul. Who is it that you tell the truth to? And they love you anyway. Well, the next part of the story goes on that after a while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them." And then they say this interesting thing, your accent gives you away. Your accent gives you away. Now, we've got a bit of context here. People from Galilee, from the north, had a very distinct accent. It's like people from Belconnen, is it? You could tell where Peter was from by his accent. I grew up in Sydney, so I could tell who was from Blacktown, the Westies. I could tell who was from Vaucluse, just by the way they spoke, you know. If you've ever been to any part of Scotland, you know that the accent changes about every 4 miles. And people 4 miles down the road don't understand what they're saying there. And so accents are a very big thing. So when Peter spoke, even said, "I don't know the man," even when he's lying, his accent is giving him away, I suppose, in a sense. And accents are often associated with status. Have a wild guess. Do you know what the highest status accent is in our world today? And it's not English. The highest status language in our world today is Swedish. So if you want to have high status in a meeting or a gathering or a party, just pretend you're Swedish. Not like the cook on the Muppets, but you know that'd be kind of, you get cancelled for that. But natives to Jerusalem knew Galileans, and Galileans were kind of considered to be the hillbillies, the hicks, the kind of not very well. Your accent gives you away. Then Peter not only gave an oath. The Bible tells us that he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I don't know the man." So Peter's gone from, "I will follow you wherever you go, and all these other weaklings and cowards may disappear into the night, but me, I'm going to be with you, Jesus, right to the end. You can count on me, Jesus." A few hours later, I don't even know this guy. A few hours later, or maybe some moments later, not only do I not know this guy or what you're talking about, I don't know the man. Now he's saying, I'm going to say this with an oath, and I'm also going to call down not only God, but curses upon you for daring to say that I have told you a lie. And then in the story, something quite dramatic happens. A rooster crows. A rooster crows. Then Peter remembered the word of Jesus had spoken, before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. That's a very devastating line in the Bible, I think. And this is what happened to Peter. Peter, who had moved from the presence of Jesus to the courtyard, to the outer court, went outside and he wept bitterly. That's a very devastating line. Because lying will do that to your soul if you look at it straight on. Or you can live in denial and say, well, they deserved it. I don't really care about the hurt and damage I've caused. I'll just move on. But something is in Peter that wasn't in him before. And he knows. Lying will do that to our soul. We will develop blind spots. Peter remembered, you have heard it said, do not break your oath, but I tell you, do not swear an oath at all. All you need to say, Peter, and anyone who wants to listen on the mountainside, all you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond that comes from the evil one. So Peter is now this broken, sobbing, kind of tragic wreck. But the good news is that that is not the final act for Peter, as it's not the final act for us, or you, or me, or anyone. There's a tradition that's kind of awful. I don't know if it's true, but there's a tradition around Peter's life that from this time on, whenever Peter spoke in public, and he spoke in public because he's one of the main proclaimers of the gospel in the early church, every time he stood up to speak, someone in the crowd, or several people in the crowd, would make the sound of a rooster. Just to remind him that he failed, that he denied the Lord that he's now proclaiming. And tradition tells us that that happened all the way to when Peter was martyred for his faith in Jesus Christ. And moments before he died, the crowd collectively let out this rooster call. But that doesn't matter to Peter anymore. Because not only did Peter go out and wept bitterly, but there was a repentance in Peter that he was part of a group of people that turned the world upside down through the power of God. I read an interesting book on this story, or an essay on this story, and the writer of this story talked about Peter and his tears, and he said it wouldn't be found in any other form of ancient history in the ancient world, because Peter is not a king or a soldier. He's a fisherman with a Galilean accent. And the author says that a scene like Peter's denial fits into no antique genre. It's too serious for a comedy. It's too contemporary and everyday for a tragedy. Politically, too insignificant for history. But it portrays something that neither the poets nor the historians of antiquity ever set out to portray. And this is the line: that the birth of a spiritual movement in the depths of a common people. I love that last line. The birth of a spiritual movement in the depths of a common people. A kingdom where your accent doesn't matter. Where you're from, who you are, what you've done doesn't matter. How much you earn, what you've got, how many houses you've got on the Monopoly board, that doesn't matter at all. The only thing that matters is our faith expressing itself in love. There is a climax to this story that we may not know. But Jesus is crucified and he hangs upon the cross and he is resurrected. And we're going to see that in Peter's greatest failure, Peter also receives his greatest grace. All had deserted him, including Peter. The women, after Jesus had died, went to the tomb, and you may know the story from Easter that the angel told them that Jesus had risen, he's not here. And this is what the angel says, and I think this is one of the greatest lines in the whole of the New Testament, because we're dealing with Peter. And the angel says to the women, go and tell the disciples and tell Peter. I love that line. And tell Peter. Why did the angel say, go tell Peter? Because the Lord wanted Peter to know. Yep, you divided, you denied me, you did it 3 times, you had your foot in your mouth, you did the wrong thing, you felt the shame of that, the guilt of it, the remorse of that. But I still want you, as part of my kingdom, I still want you to be part of the picture. I just love that picture. It's a wonderful picture of God's love right there. That was good news for the disciples, but it was great news for Peter. Well, Jesus said, all you need to say is simply yes or no, and let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Anything comes other than that from the evil one. So we don't have to spin, we don't have to be anything we're not, we don't have to be more than we are, we don't have to pretend to be, we don't have to roll out our resume every time we talk to each other, we don't have to deceive each other that we're more than we are, or even less than we are. We simply have to lean in to this wonderful, wonderful grace of God.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you.
Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the